Usually when we think about international espionage or like global intelligence operations, we picture something straight out of a blockbuster movie.
Right, the whole James Bond aesthetic.
Exactly. You imagine these highly trained operatives, forged passports, sophisticated gadgets, laser-focused precision.
Yeah, the classic spy thriller archetype.
Right. And it all feels very organized, very top-down. You expect a certain level of, rigorous, almost clinical professionalism.
Absolutely. And historically, state-backed networks operated exactly like that, mostly because the stakes were just incredibly high.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Moving operatives across borders, it required massive logistical support. You needed safe houses, millions of dollars in funding, the whole 9 yards.
But what happens when that multi-million-dollar state-linked intelligence apparatus completely changes its playbook?
That's the real question.
Right. What happens when, instead of elite operatives in tailored suits, the people executing the missions look more like, local teenagers popping wheelies on mopeds?
It's a jarring image, for sure.
It really is. So today, we are bringing you along on a deep dive into a very strange, rapidly evolving security threat. We're looking at a phenomenon that bridges the gap between high-level, sophisticated digital propaganda and messy, chaotic, real-world physical events.
It is a massive shift in how global conflicts are playing out on local streets.
Yeah.
And honestly, it is catching a lot of traditional security apparatuses completely off guard.
Yeah, I can imagine. But before we get into the actual mechanics of how this new threat model functions, we need to lay out exactly where our information is coming from today.
Always important to cite the sources.
Right. So our primary source for this deep dive is a really detailed intelligence brief. It was recently posted on the Patreon page of a group called KULT.
Specifically under their Geopolitica y Economia collection, I believe.
Yes, exactly. And this brief breaks down a newly released, highly specific special report from Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism.
And look, because we are tracing reports from Israeli intelligence about Iranian-linked proxy networks.
Right, which is obviously very heavy.
Yeah, it touches on heavily charged global conflicts, attacks on religious institutions. We need to be crystal clear with you right out of the gate.
Yes, absolutely. We aren't here to play politics or take sides.
Not at all.
Our mission today is just to decode the source material. We are not endorsing any specific geopolitical viewpoints, and we aren't jumping into the political fray. We are simply impartially reporting the contents of the source text.
Right, just unpacking the facts, the timelines, and the strategic ideas exactly as they are presented in this intelligence brief.
Exactly. The goal is to help you understand the mechanics of this new threat model so you can stay informed about how the modern world is operating.
We're focusing strictly on the methodology here. We want to understand the how and the why behind the events described in the cult document, because the tactics being used here are, they're completely redefining asymmetric warfare.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a string of crimes across Europe that, on the surface, look completely amateurish.
Oh, highly amateur.
I'm talking sloppy, poorly executed vandalism, yet they're the subject of a special national intelligence report linking them to highly sophisticated Middle Eastern networks.
It seems like a massive contradiction.
It really does. How do those two extremes even connect? To understand that, we have to look at what actually happened on the ground last week.
Right, because if we are dealing with a state-backed intelligence apparatus, you'd expect that clinical precision we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the movie stuff.
Exactly. But when you actually look at the ground-level events starting on March 9th, that illusion shatters immediately.
Okay, let's crack the timeline from the source material. So, March 9th, in the early hours of the morning, an explosion damages a synagogue in Liège, Belgium.
Right.
The windows are shattered, but there are no injuries. Then 2 days later, March 11th, there is a claimed attack on a Jewish site in Greece.
And the report notes that no specific details were provided about the target or the method for that one, just that a claim was made.
Right, just a claim, then the pace suddenly accelerates, doesn't it?
It does. On the night of March 13th, an explosion sets fire to a synagogue in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands.
And here is where the details get really specific and, frankly, a bit bizarre.
Yeah, this card is wild.
Following that Rotterdam fire, Dutch police arrest 4 suspects. And they aren't hardened international operatives. They are teenagers.
Literally teenagers, between the ages of 17 and 19.
Which is crazy. And how do they get caught? They're found driving erratically near a completely different synagogue.
They literally drew attention to themselves.
Exactly. Then, the very next night, March 14th, two suspects riding a moped detonate an explosive device outside a Jewish school in the Buitenvelder district of Amsterdam.
And they flee on a moped.
Right, fleeing the scene of a bombing on a moped.
And through all of these incidents across Belgium, Greece, and the Netherlands over those 5 days, there is one crucial data point highlighted in the report.
What's that?
0 casualties were reported in any of these attacks.
0 casualties. Wow. Looking at this timeline, I mean, I have to be honest, this doesn't sound like a covert ops team.
Not at all.
This sounds less like a highly trained covert ops team and more like a low-budget movie heist. You have teenagers driving erratically in Rotterdam, guys fleeing the scene on a moped in Amsterdam. It just feels chaotic.
It's extremely chaotic.
So I have to ask, if this is all so incredibly amateurish, why is a national intelligence ministry issuing special reports about it? Like, why are we treating erratic teenagers on mopeds as a major geopolitical threat?
It's a fundamental question. And to answer it, we have to completely reframe how we measure the success of an attack in the modern era.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, you're looking at the shattered windows, the erratic driving, the lack of casualties, and you're seeing failure.
Right, because it's sloppy.
Exactly. But from an intelligence perspective, the physical damage isn't the primary goal here.
Wait, really? It's not?
No. The true objective is the psychological impact, and more importantly, the digital propaganda that is harvested from that physical act.
Wait, so the physical world is essentially just acting as a content farm for the digital world?
That is the perfect way to describe it. The shattered glass in Belgium, or the fire in Rotterdam, those are just raw materials.
Wow.
They are content creation opportunities for a much larger, much more sophisticated digital campaign. A teenager throwing a firebomb might look like local vandalism, but once that video is uploaded, it becomes a global weapon.
That is terrifying. But okay, if the attackers on the ground are just creating the content, there has to be a distribution network.
Absolutely.
So who is actually running the campaign? Who is pulling the strings and capitalizing on this footage?
According to the Israeli ministry's report, all of these seemingly disconnected European attacks were claimed by a previously unknown group.
Okay.
They call themselves Harakat Ashab al-Yamin al-Islamiyya, which translates to the Islamic movement of the Companions of the Right.
So a completely unknown group just suddenly appears out of thin air and starts claiming responsibility across 3 different European countries in less than a week.
Yes. What's fascinating here is what intelligence analysts found when they tracked where the footage of these attacks was actually going.
Where was it going?
The video clips weren't just staying on local Dutch or Belgian social media circles. The footage was being rapidly disseminated on Telegram channels that are affiliated with pro-Iranian Shiite militant networks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, specifically, the report names channels linked to Hezbollah and Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC.
So local European vandalism is instantly being packaged, uploaded, and exported as high-level Middle Eastern militant propaganda.
Exactly. It is an incredibly efficient pipeline. And the branding of this new group is highly deliberate. It isn't random.
Oh, so?
The ministry report points out that the name, the logo, the messaging of Harakat Ashab al-Yamin al-Islamiyya, it perfectly mimics the aesthetic and language of Iraqi militias that are aligned with Iran.
Okay, let's talk about that aesthetic for a second, because for a listener who doesn't frequent these Telegram channels, what does that actually look like? Are we talking about specific visual cues or...
Yeah, we are talking about a very specific subculture of digital propaganda. You'll typically see logos featuring green and yellow color schemes, raised fists holding assault rifles, very stylized Arabic calligraphy.
Okay.
And the videos are usually set to specific types of religious or militant chants known as nasheeds. It's a recognizable brand identity, designed to signal allegiance to a broader geopolitical axis.
Right. Now, the brief from Col 2 also brings in some outside analysis on the specific branding, right? They cite the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, the FDD.
Yes, they do. And the FDD analysts noticed a very specific linguistic connection that ties this all together.
What did they find?
The name of this brand new group closely mirrors the name of a U.S.-designated Iraqi militia called Harakat Ansar Allah al-Afia.
Okay, and why is that significant?
Because the leader of that specific militia was reportedly killed in late February.
Which is just weeks before these European attacks started.
Exactly. Because of that tight timeline, the FDD suggests that these attacks in Europe might be designed to serve as a message of revenge for that killing.
Okay, hold on. I need to pause and push back on this narrative for a second.
Go for it.
Because I'm struggling to connect point A to point B here. We have 17-year-olds driving erratically in Rotterdam and kids on mopeds in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Are we seriously supposed to believe that these local European teenagers are deeply ideological members of an Iraqi militia? Do they actually care about a militia leader who was killed weeks ago, thousands of miles away? That just doesn't track for me.
And you are hitting on the exact paradox that makes this threat so dangerous.
Okay, explain that.
No, the intelligence does not suggest these teenagers are deeply embedded religious militants who flew in from Iraq. It suggests they are local actors, often just petty criminals or disenfranchised youth who are being utilized by a remote, sophisticated network.
So they might not care about the ideology at all.
Exactly. They might have no idea what the broader context even is.
So how are they getting recruited? Is it like financial? Is it for the thrill?
It's often a mix, and it's facilitated by the dark web and platforms like Telegram. A sophisticated handler sitting in the Middle East can jump into a European Telegram channel or a gaming forum, find a local teenager who wants to make a few €1,000, and offer them a payout.
Just a straight-up transaction.
Right. They offer them cash to throw a rudimentary explosive at a specific address and film it. The teenager doesn't need to know who the handler is or what the grand geopolitical strategy is.
They're just completing a gig.
Exactly. The report describes this explicitly as a fusion of online propaganda, local cells, and regional terrorist networks.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because that perfectly tees up the core finding of the Israeli ministry's report. They call this an evolving operational pattern. It's a completely new threat model.
Yes, the methodology relies entirely on operating through individual operatives or very small, remotely directed cells. Think about the strategic advantage here.
Yeah, it's huge.
A state-linked network doesn't need to build a massive, heavily armed compound in Europe anymore. They don't need to smuggle weapons across borders. They just need an internet connection, some untraceable cryptocurrency, and a willing local proxy.
But the source material highlights one crucial, defining tactic that makes this work, which is the establishment of new front organizations.
Yes.
The report states they establish these new front organizations right before an attack to protect the actual people directing the operations.
That is the defining innovation of this network, and it's brilliant in its malice.
It reminds me of the way corrupt corporations use shell companies. Or, even simpler, how criminals use burner phones.
It's a burner phone, yeah.
They are essentially creating pop-up burner terror franchises. They invent a group like Harakat Ashab al-Yemen al-Islamiyya on Monday. They use Telegram to hire a local teenager to launch an attack on Tuesday. And if that teenager gets caught by the Dutch police on Wednesday, the real architects sitting hundreds or thousands of miles away are totally insulated. The burner group takes the heat, the Telegram channel is deleted, and the network just spins up a new one next week.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can immediately see why this shell company approach is an absolute nightmare for global counterterrorism.
I mean, how do you even fight that?
You really struggle to. Traditional counterterrorism relies on mapping out networks over months or years. You track financing, you identify hierarchies, you monitor safe houses, you predict where a known group will strike next.
Right.
But how do you map a network that didn't exist until 3 days ago? How do you track the financing of a group that is designed from its inception to be disposable?
You can't. You're constantly chasing ghosts. The Diaspora Affairs Minister, Amichai Chikli, is quoted in the brief calling these events part of a worrying pattern. He explicitly states that Iranian-linked terrorist networks are trying to expand their reach into European cities and Jewish communities. And they are doing it using these invisible, disposable conduits.
We also have to look at what Joe Trusman, the senior research analyst at the FDD, noted about this.
What did he say?
Well, he validated your earlier point about the physical attacks themselves being amateurish. He told Fox News Digital that, yes, the attacks have been mostly unsophisticated.
Right.
However, he emphasized that the danger isn't in the sophistication of the bomb, it's in the reach of the broadcast.
Yeah.
Trusman warns that there are serious concerns because the group's propaganda videos are starting to gain traction online.
Right, because an unsophisticated attack that goes viral can be just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than a sophisticated one that stays hidden.
Absolutely. The viral traction serves two massive purposes for the network. First, it creates the climate of fear they desire. Second, it serves as an algorithmic recruitment tool.
It gamifies the violence.
Yes. It gamifies it. Other disenfranchised local actors see the videos, see the attention they get, and want to emulate them. It is a self-sustaining algorithmic feedback loop.
And unfortunately, this decentralized digital-first model of violence does not respect borders. While the cult brief focuses heavily on the Israeli intelligence report out of Europe, the source material explicitly notes that we have to look at this in a broader global context.
It's not just a European problem.
Right. The attacks in Belgium, Greece, and the Netherlands aren't happening in a vacuum.
No, they are part of a wider, very alarming increase in threats worldwide. The methodology we're seeing in Europe mirrors a broader pattern of instability.
Yeah, the brief specifically details incidents happening in North America around the exact same time.
What kind of incidents?
Well, the text mentions that in recent weeks, 3 different synagogues in Toronto were attacked with firearms.
Wow.
And even closer to the European timeline, on March 12th, right in the middle of the attacks in Greece and Rotterdam, a man drove a truck into a synagogue near Detroit.
When you lay out the geographic spread, Toronto, Detroit, Liège, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Greece, you started to understand the immense pressure being placed on security services.
And the profound psychological toll on these local communities.
Exactly. You have diverse geographic locations experiencing simultaneous, low-level, but highly terrifying incidents.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? I mean, if you are sitting in your car right now or making dinner, it is incredibly jarring to realize that local neighborhood community centers and schools are getting caught in the crossfire of high-level geopolitical conflicts.
It brings the threat right to your doorstep.
It really does. We aren't talking about military bases or embassies being targeted. We are talking about the synagogue down the street or the local elementary school. And the official responses to this threat really underscore how serious the situation has become.
The official guidance being issued reflects a real, palpable sense of vulnerability. The intelligence brief notes that Israel's National Security Council has actually urged its citizens abroad to conceal items that identify them as Israeli or Jewish.
I mean, think about the weight of that recommendation. A national security apparatus is advising citizens to actively hide their identity while simply walking down the street in foreign Western cities.
Yeah, because the threat of remote decentralized violence is so pervasive.
That isn't a precaution for a war zone. That's a precaution for walking down the street in Amsterdam or Toronto.
It is a stark indicator of how severe the perceived threat level is. Furthermore, the European Jewish Congress has spoken out, warning that the repeated claims by this new group, Ashab al-Yamin, raise serious concerns about a coordinated network targeting Jewish communities across Europe.
This raises an important question, though. When the European Jewish Congress talks about a coordinated network, they aren't necessarily talking about a room full of people in suits moving physical pieces on a map, are they?
Not anymore, no.
We are witnessing the globalization of local crime. It's fueled by these internet echo chambers. A localized threat in Detroit or an isolated shooting in Toronto suddenly mirrors the operational tactics of this pop-up shell network operating in Amsterdam. It all blurs together into one generalized, suffocating climate of anxiety.
And that generalized anxiety is the ultimate gold standard goal of asymmetric warfare.
It is.
Oh yeah. If a state-linked network sitting in the Middle East can make a community in Toronto feel the reverberations of a shattered window in Belgium, and they can achieve that using nothing more than a teenager, a moped, and a telegram channel, they have achieved a massive return on a very minimal investment.
Wow, yeah, when you put it like that.
They have successfully exported terror without ever crossing a border themselves. The weapon isn't the explosive anymore. The weapon is the algorithm that distributes the video of the explosive.
It is a terrifyingly efficient model. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to make sure we've clearly mapped out the evolution of this threat. We started by looking at a series of physical attacks in Europe that seemed chaotic, amateurish, and resulted in 0 casualties.
Things that looked like mere petty crime.
Right. But through the lens of the Israeli Ministry's intelligence report, we decoded what is actually an unprecedented and highly sophisticated machine.
We saw how global networks are utilizing a burner organization strategy. They create disposable front groups to shield the real architects of the violence.
That's like shell companies for terrorism.
Exactly. And we explored the mechanism behind it, how they rely on dark web forums and telegram channels to recruit and direct local, unsophisticated actors.
They essentially freelance the violence to teens on mopeds who are just looking for a payout or a thrill.
And we discussed how the physical damage is entirely secondary to the digital impact. The goal is to generate footage that can be amplified across militant networks to create a disproportionate climate of global fear, connecting isolated incidents from Amsterdam all the way to Detroit.
It completely flips our traditional understanding of security on its head. It means that the biggest threat to a neighborhood isn't necessarily an organized sleeper cell. It might be a kid with a smartphone who just accepted a gig from an anonymous account.
Which is a chilling thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that leaves us with a final, somewhat provocative thought to mull over as we sign off today.
It's the ultimate counterterrorism dilemma.
Exactly. If global terror networks can now operate essentially like decentralized pop-up digital marketing campaigns, if they can spawn a fake disposable organization overnight, use Telegram to financially incentivize a local teenager to throw a firebomb, harvest the footage for global propaganda, and then dissolve back into the internet without a trace. Wait, how can any society effectively protect its local communities from a threat that technically didn't even exist a week ago?
When the battlefield is everywhere and the soldiers are disposable, traditional defense mechanisms become obsolete.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the information around you, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.